Why vulnerability is the opposite of professionalism. In this video, we'll be discussing the topic of vulnerable content and whether it's a help or a hindrance in your efforts to winning consulting clients. And with vulnerable content, I mean written or video posts where you talk about emotions, about your personal struggles, posts where you talk about your inadequacies and any other personal matter. All things that are mainly meant to build affinity with you on a personal level. That kind of content is everywhere on social media, of course. But some influencers on LinkedIn have long been suggesting that it's also good for business purposes. The idea being that, sure, you need to be competent at what you do, but what makes people really buy is when you are relatable. Now, I'm not going to be telling you what you should do because it can be quite a sensitive matter, and who am I to tell you whether you should post personal content or not? But after being very active on LinkedIn for years now and observing what works from my own experience, and that from almost 1,000 people and influencers who I've either spoken to or studied, I will simply share my own rules of engagement as far as personal content is concerned, and I hope that you get some value out of it. My content is making some $350,000 in revenue, and about half of it comes from content or content-based referral. So that helps to put things into perspective. I'm still far away from making the impact that I want to be making. Now, we all know that attention is currency. But just like currencies, not all attention is made equal. If you take off your clothes in a busy city center, you will certainly attract attention. And if you perform the equivalent of getting naked, this time on social media, and you talk about your mental health challenges, your traumas, your addictions, your divorce, and so on, stuff that we see day to day on LinkedIn, well, you will also attract attention. Now, to get it out of the way, I openly admit my bias against any kind of oversharing, whether that's on social media or even within wider groups of friends. On a personal level, I think that amplifying your struggles in this way is not a good way of dealing with them. And it only makes things worse, both on an individual level as well as on a societal level, where people start to try to top each other and it all becomes something of a victim Olympics. However, I don't want my personal convictions to interfere with a sober assessment of the phenomenon of vulnerable content. I want to look at it strictly from the perspective of, will it make money for a consultant or somebody else selling B2B services? This is what this channel is all about, so I don't want my bias to cloud my judgment. And since there is so much emotionally vulnerable content out there, you can make the assumption that it also drives financial results. And not just assumptions, there's proof. For example, there's the big LinkedIn influencer and marketing consultant Shay Rowbottom, who became famous mainly for her stories of childhood abuse and the subsequent trauma. She is a big advocate for sharing your innermost secrets publicly and teaches her methods to her clients. And because she isn't shy posting about her financial success either, you might get the impression that being emotionally vulnerable is a good tool to win clients. Well, is it? Not too long ago, I ran a couple of back-of-the-envelope calculations, and I concluded that Shay and her boyfriend John, at the height of Shay's popularity, probably pulled in about $1 million a year in revenue. And let's be generous, let's say they pulled in double. Let's say they pulled in $2 million a year. Surely that's an impressive number. So let's let it stand for a moment, and let's now look at somebody who's the polar opposite of Shay Rowbottom. And that is Chris Walker, the CEO and founder of Refine Labs, a marketing agency and consultancy. Chris doesn't share anything personal about himself on social media. Everything he talks about is his narrative and his expertise. The most personal thing I know about him is that he has a dog. And the last time I heard from him about his business's revenue, which is about a year ago, it stood at some $20 million a year. He has built that completely off two platforms, LinkedIn Organic and a community-based Q&A style podcast. And let's also look at another heavy hitter on LinkedIn, Justin Welsh. He makes about $1 million a year in revenue at a 95% profit margin all by himself. Justin shares a little bit of personal content, but it's pretty innocuous stuff. So it's like how he was burned out as an employee or how he enjoys taking long walks with his wife. So it's hardly the stuff for a therapist's office. Very few people who share personal, emotional-laden content are bigger than Shay Rowbottom. So she, the queen of vulnerable content, pulls in $1 to $2 million a year, maybe at a 50 to 60% profit margin because she has a team to pay after all. It's very safe to say that people who have a smaller following and follow her example, they probably make less. So the conclusion could be that in light of the alternatives and the possibilities out there, maybe talking about your personal traumas and being emotionally very open might not be the big moneymaker after all, especially if that kind of content does not really relate to what you do as a professional, what the service is that you sell. Sure, if you're a trauma therapist, that's a different matter. But as a marketer or salesperson? Over the last couple of years, I've spoke to probably some 1,000 people overall, sales calls, just networking calls and calls with clients. And so I've learned quite a bit about how much people actually make. And while I don't have scientifically verifiable data on this, it's mainly anecdotal evidence, there's a very clear correlation that those people who speak about themselves, who are very emotional, who talk about vulnerable topics, they make less than those people who focus on their expertise. It's almost like if you get hooked on the dopamine drug that oversharing gets you, all the attention, all the messages of support, that may lead to you neglecting other aspects of your life and business, such as revenue and profit, those kinds of details. It's almost like the dopamine drug takes over your life. Does it sound familiar? So again, I'm not telling you what you should do. I would bring better and more data if I tried to do that. This is just to document what I've decided for myself. And so here are my 6 rules for creating content that might not get me the most amount of attention, but that are the most likely foundation for actually winning clients. 1 like for your expertise is worth 100 likes for your personal vulnerable content. If you're well known for your expertise, you will attract people who value your expertise. That will become your audience. If you're well known for your oversharing, that's the audience that you will attract. Which audience do you think pays more? When I was doing my calculations for Chris Walker versus Shay Rowbottom, I found that Shay made about $1.30 per follower that she had. Chris Walker, whose following is much smaller than Shay's, is making between $100 and $200 per follower per year. And that's the power of focusing your content on your expertise. $1.30 versus $100 to $200. Be known for your expertise. Rule number 2, the bigger an achiever somebody is, the more judgmental they are. You want to work with achievers. They have more money to spend. You have to show up at your very best. And so chances are you're also going to learn more from them. It's all one big virtuous circle. On the flip side, they also pass more judgment. There's almost a perfect correlation that the more successful somebody is, the more senior in an organization they are, the less patience they have for stories of personal struggle and emotional oversharing. It's like, go fix yourself before you enter the arena. You can resist this fact, you can cry about it, you can complain about it, or you can accept it and act accordingly, and not give those who are most likely to judge you for your emotional incontinence more reasons to do so. They will still judge you. They are judgmental by nature. And so try to have them judge you on the merits of your content. Maybe you're a little bit boring in your content, or maybe you're too wordy. That's fine. But at least they are judging you on your content, which you can always improve in, rather than you as a person. They shouldn't be judging you as a person. They will still judge you for your professional content, like if it's too banal or too wordy or anything like that. So there's still plenty of judgment to go around, that's for sure. But at least that will be judgment on your content rather than on you as a person who cannot get their act together. Rule number 3, look at the results. In my early days, I was posting more personal content. For example, my struggles with self-doubt as I was starting my business. At the time, I was influenced by people who were very much advocating for this type of content. And so I thought, this is the way how things are done. I need to join in. But you know what? That kind of content never brought any clients. Whenever someone becomes a client off the back of my content, I always ask them if they remember which post sparked their attention. And it's never the personal content. Now, it's true that it's never just one post that makes somebody reach out to you. It's much more your content in aggregate that makes somebody become an inbound lead for you. However, what is also true is that there are peaks in the content. Those kind of posts that really hit the bullseye. Someone is following you on a regular basis, they're familiar with you, but then you post one thing that really resonates with them and they decide to get in touch. This happened to me just recently, where I posted a video on LinkedIn where I was discouraging professionals to become business coaches. And that so resonated with one person who's been following me for a while that he just reached out and became a client. And in contrast, no one has ever come to me and said, wow, that post about your personal struggles, that really hit home with me. How can we work together? It just never happens. And that's interesting, isn't it? Rule number 4, not everything has been said. A few years ago, a post from Shay Rowbottom made a really big impression on me. She talked about how everything has already been said, that there's nothing new under the sun, that you can find literally any kind of marketing advice that is applicable to you somewhere on the internet. Someone has already said it. And her conclusion from this is, at least implicit, is because everything has been said, the only way for you to stand out is through your personality, whether you are likable, whether you are relatable as a person. It's like your subject matter expertise is kind of table stakes. Everybody has it. And so the only way to stand out is through your personality. And at this point, I fundamentally disagree with this notion. Not everything has been said. There are always new things to learn and to teach. And the real value lies in the little nuances that you discover. And that discovery, be it based on experience or the product of your intellectual effort, that is by far the most valuable element in your content. That is the thing that's going to get you inbound leads. And the success of this kind of content strongly correlates with the amount of effort that you put into it. For example, that video about professionals who shouldn't become business coaches, that took me easily 4 hours to script. And this video here that I'm making here, that took me 6 hours to script. And sure, I could have just put up a short post where I make fun of vulnerable content and of people who are emotionally incontinent. But I really wanted to think it through in depth. Why do I disagree with it so much? And could my judgment of it be just a product of bias? And to think things through in such a thorough way, it takes time. Now, I'm sure there's someone somewhere on the internet who makes exactly this very point. Maybe someone 3 years ago who I don't know of, I've never heard of them, made exactly this point about vulnerable content versus professional content. It's possible, but that doesn't matter. Because objectively, I may not be breaking new ground here, but in my bubble of followers, in my little world, I am breaking new ground. I've never heard anybody speak about this at this level of depth and nuance this clearly. So this is where I break new ground. It's relative. Ultimately, that is the thing that's going to attract the new audience to me and build affinity with me. People who also want to grow their business and for whom this nuance will be a source of inspiration, and they will change how they think, they will change how they do things, and they will kind of become grateful to having learned that from me. And that builds the right kind of affinity. And so I fundamentally disagree with the idea of everything has been said. It might be true on a factual level, but it's truly a poor foundation to build your content strategy on. Instead, try to break new ground in your world. Expand your expertise and ignore the world at large. Think deeply and show the process that you take to arrive at your conclusions. Rule number 5, personal content is cinnamon, meaning it's a spice to be applied lightly. Have you ever tried to eat a spoonful of cinnamon? I don't recommend it. It's just the same with any other spice. Try salt or pepper. The best dose is a sprinkling, not a mouthful. And it's the same with vulnerable content. Not posting any personal content isn't good either. You don't want the oatmeal that you provide just to be completely bland and tasteless, but also you don't want to overdo it. And that's why even the most professional content producers like Chris Walker occasionally mentions his dog or what he did over the holidays. And that's why Justin Welsh mentions his burnouts as an employee or shares pictures from his backyard. That is cinnamon. But their main dish is one made from the ingredients of breaking new grounds in their domain of expertise. Justin Welsh has perfected the art of templatized content and producing large amounts of it at scale. Chris Walker is destroying many myths in B2B marketing and how it is done traditionally. Mind you, none of which are earth-shattering Nobel Prize-winning insights. And there are people who have made these points earlier before them. What Justin and Chris have done are tweaks, but they are executed on with discipline and conviction. And most importantly, with a fascination for the subject matter at hand. Rule number 6, which pill do you want to take? Just like in the Matrix, you decide whether you want to swallow the red pill or the blue pill. When you take the blue pill, you focus on yourself. You think it's all about your likability. You look at expertise shallowly. You think that everything has already been said. And so the only way to stand out is to put on a show as a person and going all me, me, me. If you take the red pill, you lose yourself in the music, as the poet said. You become less important and your work comes into the foreground. The most fascinating and interesting people I have met are on fire for a thing. Something outside of themselves. My friend Flavio has a maniacal obsession with sports and staying in shape. He's the master of time management. He somehow manages to squeeze in 4 hours of sports every day, despite having a very successful corporate career and having a family. He has mastered efficiency and time management to a breathtaking level. My friend Evan is obsessed with Machiavelli and how to map realist philosophy onto business leadership in the 21st century. And the best stories ever told are always about someone who burns for something, who has a mission that is outside and bigger than themselves. You know, Picasso is all about painting. Mozart was obsessed about his music. Billy Elliot is all about how a boy is fascinated with ballet, despite their little identities. And in contrast, the most boring and dull people that I've ever met are always people who are too self-obsessed. They only talk about themselves, maybe other people, but it's all about their feelings, their experiences of the world, their little traumas, how they've been offended about something, what they like, what they dislike. That is boring. And these are the equivalents of oversharers on LinkedIn. The attention that they generate is one of voyeurism rather than of interest and admiration. And I never want to join their ranks. I want to take the red pill. And because of these 6 rules, these 6 insights, for myself, I've chosen the different path. I conclude that professional content that showcases my expertise and that shows real passion for my subject matter is the thing that will get me the best results. And while it won't drive huge engagement for me, it is the best foundation to build a sustainable business on, rather than oversharing on my personal life. I'm by no means an expert on this yet. My content is not yet raking in the millions, but based on everything I see, this is my recipe. It's worked for me very well so far. Feel free to steal it with pride.